Uh, yeah, so yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Stephen Hoy, and Laura was pretty close on the pronunciation. And yeah, I'm the author of the new book, Destination Hikes in and around Southwestern BC. And that just came out on May 11th. And so let's just get into it. Let's see. Yeah, so yeah, as Laura said, I grew up in Vancouver. I grew up in Burnaby and Coquitlam specifically. So I've been, hiking around here for a bit. And my introduction to the outdoors mostly came through scouting in Burnaby. That got me into camping and making fires, lots of fires. And then I got into hiking mostly through sort of high school outdoor education and outdoor club programs, and got hooked on hiking, and started to dream about one day writing a hiking guidebook. And so yeah, I'm sitting here in East Van. I'm in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. It's worth noting that Squamish Nation today asked the BC government to put a stop to old growth logging in its territory, and logging that's happening without consent. So that's interesting development on that front today. So yeah, as I said, I grew up in Burnaby. This is a photo from Burnaby Mountain with my son going down the Velodrome Trail. And these are some pictures from some of my first hiking experiences. We've got clockwise from top left, we've got Bear Mountain in the Fraser Valley. We've got Mount Price in Garibaldi Provincial Park, Diamond Head as well in Garibaldi, and then Lake O'Hara in Yoho Provincial Park. And these are some of my first day hiking, first backpacking, first car camping kind of trips back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so, yeah, after getting into hiking, I became a journalist in university, kind of accident. I ended up at a student newspaper. And so on the left is my first article ever about hiking in the student newspaper from SFU. And then on the right is from my 8 years as a journalist at the Georgia Strait newspaper. Is an article that sort of broke the news that the Sea to Sky Gondola project wanted to delete a strip of land from Squamish Provincial Park. So yeah, I became a journalist, and I wrote a lot about hiking. I continued to write a lot about hiking, and wrote a lot about parks issues, in addition to all sorts of other stuff over the years. And so, after being a journalist for a dozen years, the kind of opportunity came up to write 105 hikes in and around southwestern British Columbia, and this came out in 2018. And as a lot of you are familiar with, probably the 103 Hikes book this is the successor to the 103 Hikes book, the long-running, venerable guide to hikes in this region. And so it was a huge honor to follow up on the work of Mary and David Macquarie and Jack Bryceland. I grew up reading the fourth edition specifically, and it was my favorite book of any genre in high school. So it's a huge responsibility to take on rebooting this work and providing a similar guide to hiking in the region. So yeah, and the book had a great reception. There are a lot of great feedback and media coverage and whatnot. It was just a real pleasure to put out that book and see people excited about a new hiking guide, especially since the old 103 Hikes guide hadn't been updated in about 10 years. So there was a real hunger for it. But yeah, not everyone was a fan. So, I mean, I got a lot of wonderfully kind remarks and positive feedback, but I did get some criticism and some constructive feedback. And this is just one of my favorite emails that I got. It said, "I'm astonished that you made some significant poor choices in rewriting the iconic 103 hikes." And she went on to say, Halvor London, that's the legendary trail builder locally, is cursing you in Norwegian for downgrading to worthwhile the 2 Bunsen Lake hikes in the book. And she's talking about beautiful and the Lakeview Trail over at Bunsen Lake. You know, interesting. That was one of the most, I guess, sort of pseudo controversial parts of the book, is that I had ratings for ratings for quality based on kind of a reward to effort scale in 105 hikes, which is different than 103 hikes. And, you know, definitely it gave people something to argue about. And another thing that was controversial in my first book, 105 Hikes, is the wildlife photos. There was particularly a photo of a raven. It's not actually a crow. And a photo of a starfish that seemed to rub some readers the wrong way. I mean, considering that this is Nature Vancouver, I assume a lot of you appreciate the wildlife photos, maybe a little more than some hikers. Some hikers just want to see the view, but I really like taking wildlife photos and including wildlife photos in the books. But I can understand, you know, some people just want to see what the views look like, especially when in my first book there's only room for, you know, 1 photo per hike. Anyways, that brings us to today. Destination hikes in and around Southwestern British Columbia is kind of a, I'm calling it the thrilling sequel to 105 hikes. It's really like you can look at it as an expansion pack, a companion volume to 105 hikes. It's a standalone guide, but it has 55 new hikes, as in 55 hikes not in the first book of 105 hikes. And so it's you know, it's a guide of 55 more hikes, but the great thing about it is it's you know, it's more detailed, it has more photos, and because I learned from the first book, I think it's a better book. And so let's take a look. So the book is 55 hikes. All the hikes are day hikeable, and the region is kind of you know, like over to Nanaimo in the west, in the east to Manning Park in the Coquihalla, north to kind of Pemberton and Duffey Lake, and south to you know, Mount Baker and the Marble Mount area. So a little bit of northern Washington, kind of doing a circle around Vancouver. And so so the book involved you know, 700 kilometers of trails and 300 plus hours of hiking. You know, those are the material. That's what made it into the book. There's of course a trial and error of extra hikes that didn't make it, and extra parts of the hikes that, you know, didn't go in. And the book has 55 topographic maps and 130 photos and almost 60,000 words. So it's like a similar word length to 105 hikes. And the book begins with a foreword from Cecilia Point, who is a Musqueam political activist I've admired for many years, and she kind of gets the book off to the right start. You know, giving people some context for the history and the current reality of the land, and kind of a call for hikers to treat the land with respect, and to think about the past and future as they go onto the land. And of course, so you know, we don't want like hikers to get lost or to you know, litter all over the backcountry. So the book starts off with, you know, safety and outdoor ethics information, like leave no trace, and the 10 essentials and trip planning. You know, some adventure smart messaging, and before you go into the the hikes. And I've also tried to weave this material in throughout the book. So yeah, here's an overview map showing the kind of regions that the book covers. It's a similar region actually to 105 hikes. There are some differences, like for instance, there's like Galiano Island and Nanaimo and Marble Mount in this one. But the idea was to cover the same region, different hikes. And hikers seem to love charts. So there's charts, and I like the charts too. There's charts in the front and back. The first chart in the front is sort of a key to the scenic features, the destinations, if you will, in the book. So we've got, the quality and difficulty, but we also have, waterfalls, big trees, wildflowers, swimming, coastal and mountain views, as well as historical and geological interest. And these are sort of the destinations we're referring to in the title that we're kind of highlighting with these hikes. And they're the features that I looked for as I was, choosing hikes to include in this book. And in the back, there's an appendix there with the numbers. So, if you wanted to look for hikes, by distance and time and elevation gain, it's in the back. So just take a look at the kind of the main hiking write-up format. And this is very familiar to anyone who's used 105 hikes or 103 hikes. It's the same basic format, just with some colorful icons on the top left, which correspond to the sort of scenic and intriguing features, like wildflowers and swimming and geology. And so, we've got your general stats. We've got the topo maps. There's a introduction to each hike, sort of describes the reward and some of what you're going to see. And then there's more detailed driving directions and more detailed hike directions as well, because I have 4 pages per hike rather than 2 in this book. So there's a lot more directions. There's also a lot more room for the stuff I'm interested in, which is, doing a little bit of research on the nature and culture and history of these trails, and imparting some of that info. And so, here's a map. So these maps were done with Steve Chapman. He's from Canadian Map Makers, so it's a collaboration between us. He makes the base maps, and I label them, and it's a whole process. It's a long process of back and forth, and he also designs the Coquitlam and the Golden Ears maps. If you've ever seen them, actually, here's the Coquitlam trail map. He designs a lot of maps, and he also works on a trip planning app called Overdue. So, anyways, we made these topographical maps, and they're fairly detailed. They have topographic lines, and I think people like them a bit better than some of the sketch maps in some of the older books. Although, admittedly, I'm a huge fan of the sketch maps, and I kind of love their simplicity. Anyways, I mentioned there's 4 pages per hike, so there's room for more photos in this book, which is great because then I could put wildlife photos, and people wouldn't get mad that there wouldn't be photos of the view. There's also a stop of interest for every hike. In this case, we got Alexander Falls here, so it's a waterfall. Sometimes there are wetlands, historical sites, heritage sites, museums, local museums. In one case, it's like a food trail. So these are places. In this case, we're looking at the hike as the destination of your day trip, and these are a cool point of interest either on the way or near the hike that you add to your day to make it more interesting. And also often there's sometimes there's some kind of relation, and going to the stop of interest might tell you a bit about the hike, or give you some aspect of the area's history. So I've been talking about these scenic and intriguing destinations, and so Waterfalls is one of them. And look at some photos. And so this is on the left here. This is on Monmouth Creek, across the Squamish River from Squamish. And this is the Echo Lake hike, which is uh, probably the best waterfall hike in the sea to sky region. And this is what I think is the coolest, the neatest waterfall um, on that hike. And what's really neat about this hike is it goes up the creek, very steep creek, and it goes past several waterfalls. But at one point, there's sort of a sequence of three or four incredible waterfalls, and there's the first waterfall that's looks like something sculpted, like a kind of a Picasso or kind of painting out of the granodiorite. And then there's like a keyhole waterfall, and then you have this waterfall with this kind of rock arch that, you know, who knows how long this one will last, but it's very interesting. And another of my favorite waterfalls from the hikes is this one is on Eden Creek, over near Hope, in the along the Silver Skagit Road. And this is sort of a, you know, halfway up this hike, and there's more than this waterfall, but this is the best one, and it's a great horsetail waterfall, and also the geology is kind of interesting here too. There's a bunch of strata exposed that are really interesting to look at. Would like to find more out about them actually. Big trees are something I really like to see on hikes and go to on hikes, and because I was particularly looking for them for this book, I even noticed more of them than I probably would. And so the pictures, these pictures don't actually show super big trees, but over on the left here is near Crooked Falls on Sigurd Creek in the Squamish Ashlew area up the Ashlew River Valley. And there's a lot of big trees and mossy boulders in those woods there. It's also a Squamish Nation wild spirit place. And here is Ghost Pass Lake, which is kind of like in a way, it's kind of like the premier old growth hike in the book. It's the only hike where you spend, you know, most of your time going through an unlogged valley, through old growth woods, and just so many old trees, so much devil's club. But the place is also like kind of swallowing up the trail, because the trail hasn't been used that much. It was it's an old horse trail, but it was reinvigorated as a Western Canada Wilderness Committee, activist project where they were trying to, you know, save that area, as spotted owl habitat. So it's kind of a fading trail, and but it's a beautiful trail, but it's covered with tons of deadfall, easy to lose, and it's kind of in the book as in the hopes that, you know, kind of a challenge to experienced hikers, but also in hopes of keeping this trail from being completely swallowed up by the woods. But this one is for experienced hikers only. And wildflower meadows. I mean, when people who don't hike ask me what I like about hiking, and then often I'll say the flowers, and they'll look at me funny. But, you know, I mean, for a lot of us hikers, the summer wildflower peak bloom is a huge draw. And these are some of my favorite flowers. These are the spreading phlox, and these are from Flora Pass over in the Chilliwack River Valley, overlooking Chilliwack Lake. And I love seeing these flowers in the alpine meadows. And these are another favorite, Western pass flower or Western anemone, also known as who flowers or like Dr. Seuss flowers. They look like something out of one of those books. But you almost always see this seed head here because the flower is quite early and doesn't last very long. But it's always a neat sight to see these. So like several years ago, I probably hardly swam in lakes. But the last few years, I've really come to love swimming in lakes on hikes, and especially after you go up a hot summit or something and swim after. So this is probably the most beautiful swimming hole, or one of them in the book. And this is Statlew Lake, up Harrison Lake, on the western side, and takes a long drive on logging roads to get there, but it's well worth it. There has been a bunch of logging activity in this area though, so it has messed with the trail a bit. But I'm told people are still finding their way there and that it's still navigatable. It's despite some erroneous reports that the trail has been taken out by a landslide, it's still there. And here is another place that I just love swimming. This is Upper Marriott Lake in the Cayush Creek Basin, past Pemberton, very near to Joffrey Lakes. And this is in the wildfire smoke a couple years ago. And boy, was this lake refreshing in all that smoke, but extremely cold. But yeah, this is a gorgeous lake. I'd like to see it without the smoke, but and this is also a kind of a destination for experienced hikers as well, because this is past the hut that most hikers stop at. And after that, it's a bit of off-trail navigation to get to this lake, although it's not too hard. Yeah, so plenty of coastal views here. I do love hikes along the coast. It's not just about being up in the mountains away from the water. So here's Mount Killam on Gambier Island, and this is definitely one of my favorite viewpoints from researching the book. This is just a fantastic day trip from Vancouver, and you can, it takes two boats though. You have to, take the ferry from Horseshoe Bay to Langdale, and catch a private ferry, basically a water taxi that's contracted by ZBT Ferries to get from Langdale to Gambier Island. And but yeah, this is a great day trip, and this is the viewpoint before the summit. The summit doesn't actually have a view, but this is an amazing vantage of Howe Sound. And then, looking back at the North Shore Mountains from the west, so you can see the lions and all that. And here's a wonderful spot on Galliano Island. This is the Bluffs in Bluff Park, part of the Mount Galliano hike in the book. Looking at active paths where the ferry goes in, and that is another day trip. I love these island day trips, so you can go hop on the ferry, without a car. You can bus or you can drive to the ferry terminal, and then you can do a foot passenger thing and go hike a mountain on one of the islands and come back in the same day, but it feels like you've been away for a whole weekend. Yeah, and of course, ridge walking and summits are a huge part of any hiking book. And so this is Gott Peak up in the Blowdown Pass area. This is near Duffey Lake itself. And this is just a wonderfully scenic place at one of the gateways to the Stein Valley. It's the ridge walk on this peak is really something. First of all, you got that beautiful lake below, Blowdown Lake, which is another amazing swimming lake, and you can camp kind of around there. And also this ridge is it's covered with quartz and mica. It's quite a stroll. And this is from the Coquihalla Pass area. This is the col between the two peaks of Zoa Peak, with Yak Peak behind it, which is Yak Peak is also in the book. It's not as hard as it looks, although it is super steep. And these are both in the North Cascades, an extension of the North Cascades into Canada. And yeah, I mentioned like history is one of my favorite things about writing a guidebook, is the opportunity to do some research on the history and to learn more about the history of the areas these trails go through, as well as the implications for the current day. And so yeah, fire lookouts are a particular favorite place to hike. And this is a fire lookout on Mount Hallowell on the lower Sunshine Coast, north of Seashelt. And this is a kind of a wonderful structure to hike up to on old mining roads. And it's kind of falling apart, but it still has a roof. And the windows are kind of out, but and it could use some preservation. But it's really something to see this lookout on the top of this hill. Especially since a lot of fire lookout sites now, you only have like the little concrete foundations left or whatnot, or not even. And this is another fire lookout. This one's in the States. This is in Washington on the Hidden Lake Peaks. And this is actually probably the most beautiful hike in the book, actually, because of the wildflower meadows along the way, the North Cascades views. And when you're up on this peak, which is quite a steep pinnacle looking peak from one side, looks like something out of a Tolkien book. You got this fire lookout on top, and on one side you have Glacier Peak, and on the other side you have Mount Baker. So you got these two huge cascade stratovolcanoes on either side of this lookout. The funny thing about this lookout is its kind of historic importance is kind of debated, because it was only a fire lookout for, I think, a couple of decades, and it's actually been a hiking destination for way longer than it was ever a fire lookout. But it is a pretty neat site to go to. And the US, either the Forest Service or the National Park Service, I'm not sure which one, it's kind of on the boundary between the National Forest and the National Park. They've got some kind of exhibits inside with some historical like climbing artifacts, but also printouts of old visitor logs and whatnot. So it's a cool place to see. You can actually sleep in this lookout too, but you have to be early, because it really only sleeps like 2 people, and so it's first come first serve. And yeah, geology. I mean, we're blessed with really amazing geology and geomorphology in BC. So you've got this the cinder flats here, between the Cinder Cone and the Black Tusk in Garibaldi Provincial Park, this volcanic moonscape, and there's other sites of geological interest like this in the book. Here we have a really big glacial erratic. This is in the Chuckanut Mountains near Bellingham, and this is probably one of the largest ones I saw during researching this book, and so it looks like it's going to squash my friend. And yeah, wildlife. I mean, saw a decent amount of wildlife on the hikes in this book. Black bears, bald eagles, lots of deer. This is a long-toed salamander up near Radium Lake in the Chilliwack Valley, and my friend came pretty close to sitting on this one, and that's why I saw it and got a picture and saved it from being squashed. Recently, I enjoyed seeing, the rough-skinned newts over in the Seymour Valley. This is a western toad, and this is from the way to Dennett Lake in Pinecone Burke Provincial Park, north of Coquitlam. And I happened to do this Dennett Lake hike during western toad migration, and so there was just thousands of these things all over the place, all over the trails, and everywhere. You kind of had to be careful where you step in a way, because you weren't sure if you were going to step on one. Just moving everywhere during this hike. So that was a real pleasure to see these western toads out. There's a sooty grouse. And so, I mean, I've heard a lot of sooty grouses and rough grouses on hikes in BC, as anyone does. And it's a common question I get on hikes from people who haven't been hiking for very long, or even people who have been hiking for very long, is what's that hooting sound? And when I was a kid, I thought it was a moose too, but yeah, it's these grouses, as a lot of you probably know. And this sooty grouse happened to be making its hooting right next to the trail, and then just stood still, and so I've never seen one so close, displaying its making its mating display like that. So but yeah, this one was just right next to the trail and then didn't want to move, so it was very easy to get the photo before quickly moving on. So yeah, I mean, that's I guess that's it for my presentation about destination hikes for now. We'll go on to questions, but tell you about my next book. My next book is kind of a it's the research has wrapped up, and it's now at the publisher Greystone Books for kind of design and layout. I've been working on this one for 2 years or so, and so it's best hikes and nature walks with kids in and around southwestern BC. And this is a book of 55 new hikes, kind of like destination hikes. But these are like the other books. It's 55 hikes that aren't in the other books. I like it when the books don't really overlap. And so this book is focused on, I mean, it's for parents and adults to read mostly, but it's kind of going to be designed in a fun way so it's more, attractive to kids and families. And so the hikes in this book are really, I mean, I'm pointing out like features of interest to kids and whatnot, along with the normal like nature and history and culture stuff that I like to point out. But really these are trips that are shorter and easier and really just good for all ages, really. I mean, these are a lot of hikes that I like to do when I'm not trying to do something over 4 to 6 hours. These are trips more between a lot of them are kind of between 2 and 4 hours or so, some less. And so you've got pictured in this photo is the hike to the Whistler train wreck, and there's that wonderful suspension bridge over the Cheakamus Canyon. And so this book is coming out next year, and looking forward to this. Oh yeah, and then after that, I'll work on doing an update for 105 hikes, looking in basically starting to do some research on a second edition of this book. I mean, this will be a few years off, but a couple of years off, but starting to look at doing updating some of the hikes in this book, and then also looking at new hikes to put in and replace some of the hikes in that book just to refresh the package. And a quick mention of the Overdue app. So this is an app developed by the map maker I collaborated with for the books, the maps in both the books. He works on an app called Overdue, and that's a trip planning and navigation app. And if you happen to use that app, the maps from both books are available free in this app. So if you happen to have the books and use that app, they can kind of work together. And that's it. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to taking any questions you have.